So now that I have my drawing done of flat shapes, now I can start adding some color and some light and shadow to make these flat shapes look like 3D forms. We're going to start with our pumpkin first. So I'm going to start with the base color. I know pumpkins are orange, so I'm just going to grab an orange piece of chalk. If you're doing this with colored pencil or color sticks, that's what you would start with. If you are doing this with oil crayons, same thing. I'm using the side of my chalk. You'll see my paper, you can see some texture on it. It's because my paper has what we call tooth to it. And that is good if you're using chalk because it helps hold on to all that chalk dust. I'm going to layer that in there. Now, if you're doing this lesson, I'm guessing that you watched the Connect playlist that talks about shape and form, and then there's a video of me having you practice light and shadow. So for this, because our room and our lights are everywhere, we're going to choose what side we want our light source to be on. So I'm going to choose my light source from this side coming down. If my light source is coming here on this side, that means light's going to be here and dark is going to be here. And with pumpkins, those ridges in the pumpkin are not black stripes. We always want to think of them as black stripes, and they're not. They're indentations in the pumpkin that cause shadow. They're down below the surface of that pumpkin, and so light can't get to them, and that's why we can see those ridges, and that's why they might look a little dark to you or a little black to you, because it's a shadow. I like to use colors other than black for my shadows, so you'll notice I put a little green in there. I'm going to do a little, I've got this kind of blue for my shadow, for my ridges. And then you can use your finger, or you can use a paper towel, or you can use, if you're at home, Q-tips work really great for this. At school, we have these things called blending stumps. I'm going to go in and blend my colors here a little bit. You don't want to blend too much. If you keep blending and rubbing hard and blending and rubbing hard, you're going to rub all your chalk away, and then it's going to look really dull. Your finger, also a really great blending tool, if you don't mind getting a little messy. So there's a little bit of a start for my pumpkin. Now I can go in and layer some colors, and we talked about light. So white and yellow are super colors to show light. So I'm going to add some yellow on this side of my pumpkin. Maybe a little bit of white on top. And as we come over here to this side of the pumpkin, it's going to be a little darker. So I can blend that in a little bit. I'm going to use this, I have kind of like a reddish orange, a darker orange I'm going to put in here. I'm going to blend in here and maybe put... So you can see I finished my pumpkin. I've added some more shadows to the pumpkin. I've added some more detail to the pumpkin. You can kind of see where that stem comes down inside of it. I'm trying to avoid using black, but if you do need to use little teeny bits of it, you can, but a little bit of black really goes a long way, and so I try to avoid using it whenever I can. I like to use those greens and purples. Here I started filling out my yellow gourd. My yellow gourd has a few little brown patches on it, which I'm going to add. And the gourd's yellow, so when I think about adding light and shadow to this, it's going to be a little different because we said yellow was good for light, and obviously this is yellow. So I'm going to add some white to it, And I actually see some white stripes on this gourd too, to show my light on the gourd. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go in again I'm going to use purple, I think, to add some shadow to this gourd. Now, this is where you have to be careful, because I want to add some shadow to this gourd, but this gourd is in front of this pumpkin, and I don't want to blend it in with this pumpkin either. Like, I want this to be its own separate thing, and I don't want to blend the whole thing together. That's why it's so important to look at what your shadows are on this pumpkin, because this gourd is in front of this pumpkin, which means this gourd is going to cast a shadow on this pumpkin, and adding that shadow is another way you can kind of clean that line up between that gourd and that pumpkin, as you can see right there. I'm going to work on a couple more, and I'll be back in just a moment. So I've started filling in a few more of my pumpkins and gourds, and a couple of things I want you to know is that once you get a base color on and you do some shadows and some light and do some blending, you can go back in with some chalk and do very little blending. I'm going to touch this up just a little bit and let some of that chalk just lay on the paper as well, and be the color it is and be the shadow that it is. And then always thinking about where lights and shadows are going to hit. We know light's going to hit this side. I know that because this Weeby Little is in front of this gourd is going to have some shadow down here. And that's going to do two things. It's going to give depth to my gourd and make it look more three-dimensional, and it's also going to add contrast, so this pumpkin pops right up off of it. And this Weeby Little pumpkin right here, I have to add some light to as well. And same here, I have the shadow on this pumpkin, I have the shadow on this green gourd, and then that light side on my Weeby Little. That's going to make that pop right out. So the practices that I gave you to do, we did a light side and a dark side of a shape to make it a form. And then we had that shadow underneath. And so that's something else that you're going to want to work on, is think about what color you want for a table or a tablecloth. And it does not have to be brown. It could be a different color. Now, obviously I wouldn't choose orange, because that's not going to make my gourds and pumpkins stand out. I'm going to do brown. Again, you don't have to. You could do blue or purple or whatever else you think is going to make these stand out. And then I'm going to go in with some darker colors, and this is one I would tell you a little bit of black would be okay. And I'm going to put that shadow on the table that we talked about in that practice drawing. If there's light on one side, there's going to be shadow on the other. And I'm obviously not done with this side yet. You can use your finger, or you can use a blending stump. If you're using oil crayons, fingers are good. Don't get messy, but they're good. Blending stumps are okay. So I've worked on this a little more, and I've added some background to it. And just like your squash and your gourd, you can also blend color in your background. I started adding some purple. You want to choose a background color that's going to make your fruit stand out. So again, orange or yellow might not be the greatest choice. I used purple. I could mix some blue with it. I'm going to mix some red with it and see how that looks. And when I get around the edge of my pumpkin, I want to be really careful. If you need to turn, whoops, and I just dropped it. If you need to turn your picture a little bit, you can do that. Again, you can use your finger to blend and fill in. You just don't want to blend away too much, or it will start looking really muddy and blurry and way too soft. You still want those colors to be nice and bold. If you are working from home, and if you happen to have chalk and are using it, when you are done with this, and if you're working at school, we will do this. We're going to want to spray this to kind of keep your chalk on there. It helps just help it adhere to the paper. It doesn't mean it won't rub off and you can't still blend it off, but it does help. I use hairspray. I use Aqua Net. I use the cheapest hairspray I can find. So Aqua Net is really good, or just a Suave, just a standard hairspray. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And you want it to be an aerosol can. And you just spray it lightly. It'll darken up at first when you spray it, but then it will lighten right back up when it dries. And just a light coating of it. So as you're doing that, as you're getting that background color on, if you need to go back in and clean up edges of your pumpkin, that doesn't mean outline it, but if you just need to clean up edges so you've got nice crisp edges, please go ahead and do that. So this obviously is not done. I got kind of one half of it done, and I'm going to work on the other half later. But you may go ahead and start your still life. Think about light and shadow. Think about what you want to use to do the still life. Again, I did chalk. We have chalk here in the art room, but if you want to use another material to do it, you are more than welcome to do that as well. And at home, use what materials you have. When you're done, don't forget to sign it, take a picture of it, and upload it to your Google Classroom.